to see you all here. Uh, I'm Rick Hansen, our host, and we'll be hearing from Sharon Salzberg, our teacher, momentarily. I just thought we could all arrive. Arrive in ourselves, arrive in our bodies, arrive in our minds, arrive in the present, arrive in this place, while welcoming all that we're experiencing and welcoming others who are also arriving into this Zoom meeting. Let's just take a minute to arrive, welcoming ourselves and welcoming others too. This is being recorded. I love the Thich Nhat Hanh teaching meditation, basically in rhythm with inhaling and exhaling. I am arriving, I am home, I am home, I am arriving. We're just taking a minute to arrive ourselves as other people arrive in this meeting. All right. Well, a big welcome to the arriving in you and the sort of material arriving of other people into this meeting. I'm Rick Hansen, and you might like to share where you're located. I see that Muturi is joining from Kenya, which has an electricity blackout, unfortunately. Or fortunately, probably unfortunately. I'm going to put in the chat where I'm located. If you want to ignore the chat, feel free. And just push the chat button at the bottom of your Zoom window and it'll go away. Great. It's really my great pleasure to introduce my friend and teacher, Sharon Salzberg. I met Sharon some years ago, and you know how it is when you kind of go up to a teacher who's sort of famous and you're like, "Ah," well, in my case, "Ah," and you just notice a difference. Some of them are superficially polite, but you can just feel that inside their mind the clock is ticking. They're aware of the other people standing behind you in the line, and they're just kind of phoning it in, frankly. And then you run into people who are equally prominent, sometimes even more prominent, and you suddenly feel like you really are being held in the space of their attention and being for the 15 seconds or minute and a half that's just appropriate in that setting. But you're meeting as beings in the same space. And Sharon, you have always been like that from the start. And for me, that's the mark of a real teacher. And you can just tell immediately about people. So you probably all know that Sharon has done tremendous work in the space of the heart, compassion, kindness. She began practicing many, many years ago. I'm going to read a little bit of a bio here and then turn it over to her. She's a leading spiritual teacher in America and one of the key teachers to introduce meditation practice to the West. My home practice center, you may know, is Spirit Rock Meditation Center in the kind of rolling foothills of Northern California. And they have a thing called a gratitude hut, which is my favorite place there. Well, one of two or three favorite places there. Sharon knows it. And you walk in and you see pictures of these wonderful teachers, and including like the 21-year-old version or something close of Sharon Salzberg, and the very young versions of Jack Kornfield, Joseph Goldstein, and others. Pictures of some of them with shaved heads riding on elephants in their young 20s as monastics in Southeast Asia. Anyway, Sharon definitely started a long time ago and has really been at the foundations the origins of the movement of the wisdom traditions of the East into the West in the last half century. She's co-founder of the Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, whose town motto is apparently tranquil and alert. Seems very fitting. The ancient Buddhist practices of vipassana, penetrating insight, sati, mindfulness, and metta, loving kindness, are the foundations of her work. She's the author of several books, all of them fantastic books, one of which was just released, titled Real Life, The Journey from Isolation to Openness and Freedom. And we're going to be focusing a bit on the topic of that book. Knowing Sharon, she'll freestyle profoundly in any direction we go. Our basic schedule is to turn it over to her in a moment for roughly 25 minutes or so of guided practice, then a brief discussion between her and me about it. I'll be doing the practices. I'm giving up my body for science here. I'll be her guinea pig, and we talk a bit about it, and then we'll turn it over to you all for questions, comments, discussion. If you care to comment anonymously, you can do so in the chat. I'll see it. And if you care to use your name, other people will see it as well. Okay, so Sharon, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's my big response to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for gorgeous introduction and for all of your incredible work, gathering all these people together. And it's amazing just reading that chat, just seeing the extent. It's like the whole world is gathered here, which is an amazing feeling.
Yeah.
So I won't say good morning because who knows what zone you're all in. It's really wonderful to be here and around this kind of topic. So I'm going to lead a loving kindness meditation, particularly loving kindness for oneself. Loving kindness in many ways I consider the secret ingredient in many other practices like mindfulness. And I just use the word mindfulness because that's what I'm used to, of course. But, I hear people somehow trying to accommodate what can sound like a somewhat cold clinical practice and make it clear that there's this component in here. It's not just, say, noticing your emotions with distaste or fear, or whatever you might normally bring forth in the face of some difficult feelings, but it's noticing in a certain way. And that certain way, it can be expressed through kindness or compassion or so on. And that's why what I'm going to emphasize today, loving kindness toward oneself, is actually a very profound practice. It's not at all about being self-satisfied or conceited or arrogant or increasing those states in any way. It's about coming to that place where our attention can be so open and so free that we can be present with anything in a way that is kinder and more balanced and just kind of clearer in a lot of ways. And so it's an important practice. Loving kindness meditation in general begins with a suggestion to sit comfortably, to relax physically, relax emotionally. This isn't a practice where we strive to make something special happen or try to fabricate a certain state or manufacture anything, but rather we're getting in touch with a more natural space within us. We do this practice by the silent repetition of certain phrases. There are actually many ways of doing this practice. This is the way I do this practice, and so the way that I teach it. We choose 3 or 4 phrases that express what we most deeply wish for ourselves and ultimately for others. And we begin to repeat them silently. We repeat phrases like, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, with enough space and enough silence so that it's a rhythm that's pleasing to you. I have a friend who said he thought he'd get extra credit if he said more phrases. So you said them really fast, try to get a hold of it. You don't need to do that. Just gather all of your attention behind one phrase at a time, and then the next. And I want to emphasize again that you don't need to manufacture or fabricate a special feeling. The power of the practice actually comes from our full, wholehearted presence behind each phrase, from being willing to pay attention to ourselves and others in what are actually truthful, but perhaps less accustomed ways. If you're in the habit, for example, of thinking about yourself largely in terms of your imperfections and mistakes you've made and problems you have, we're just going to give a little airtime to something else, not to try to pretend everything is totally wonderful all the time or we are perfect. But what about a little stretch to include what we normally may not include? If you're afraid of sentimentality or phoniness, this is an especially important thing to remember. This practice, I'll say, is also different from affirmations that tell us we're getting better and better or insist that we're perfect. Just as we are, if it feels phony or it feels like you're begging or imploring, like, may I please be happy? Remind yourself that what it is actually is a practice of generosity. It's generosity of the spirit. It's gift giving. It's offering. It's blessing to ourselves and ultimately to others. And the last thing I'll say before we practice is, if you notice your attention has wandered, or perhaps I should say when you notice that your attention has wandered, don't worry about it. Maybe you're lost in the past, lost in the future, judgment, speculation, or you've fallen asleep. It's okay. See if you can let go of the distraction gently and return to the repetition of the phrases. Do not worry if it happens kind of frequently. So, common phrases, you want 3 or 4 phrases. Common ones might be, may I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Live with ease means in the things of day-to-day life, livelihood, family, may it not be such a struggle. May I live with ease. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. You can use these phrases or any phrases that might be more personally meaningful to you. But for now, if you don't have other phrases, let's use these. So you're not just spending this time trying to think of better phrases. Feeling tone is not one of asking, but of gift giving. Okay? You can sit comfortably, close your eyes or not. It's fine to have your eyes open as well. If you get really sleepy, it's a good idea to open your eyes. And we're going to begin by actively taking delight in our own goodness. So much of our attention can be spent remembering the mistakes we've made or our negative actions. And here we're going to consciously point our attention towards something good we've done. Maybe a very small thing, but bring it to mind. Did you thank somebody? Did you offer to allow someone to speak first? Did you try to help somebody have a better day, even though you couldn't help their basic problem? And if no particular action comes up, think of a good quality that's alive within you. We do this not, again, to be egotistical or conceited, but to rejoice in the potential for goodness we all share in. And then silently repeat phrases that reflect what you would wish most deeply for yourself, not just for today, but in an enduring way. Phrases that are big enough, that are general enough, so they can represent a gift we would give to ourselves and ultimately to all of life. This is what we would wish for all beings everywhere, beginning with ourselves. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, Live with ease. You can gather all your attention behind one phrase at a time, so you were planting a seed in the ground. Then let it go. May be safe. Be happy. Be healthy. Live with ease. Whenever you find your attention has wandered away from the phrases, gently begin again. No matter where your mind has gone, no matter how far away it has wandered, doesn't matter. You can actively practice kindness in that moment. Gently let go. Gather your energy together. Begin again. You can find a rhythm that's pleasing to you, with enough space and enough silence so that the phrases are emerging from your heart. May I be safe. Be happy. Be healthy. Live with ease. Whatever phrases you may be using. See if you can bring to mind somebody we call a benefactor. That's somebody who represents the power of love for us. Maybe it's someone we've met, maybe it's someone we've never met, but they've inspired us from afar. Could be an adult, could be a child, could be a pet. The texts say this is someone, when we think of them, we smile. Is there someone? You just call them to mind and you just smile. You have a certain sense of rejoicing in their existence. And if so, bring them here. You can get an image of them or say their name to yourself, get a feeling for their presence, and offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. Even if the words don't seem perfect, they're the vehicle for the heart's energy, so they're serving us. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And now imagine that this being is offering loving kindness to you. So you can put yourself in the position of the recipient. Probably since it's coming from them to you, you might continue saying, may you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And just notice how it feels. You might feel embarrassed. You might feel grateful. Anything. But see if the emotions, the feelings can just wash through you as you steady your attention on the phrases. With you as the recipient, may you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Now visualize yourself sitting in the center of a circle. The circle's made up of the most loving beings you've encountered in this life. Or maybe you've never met them, but they've inspired you in some way. They've lifted your spirits in some way. Maybe they exist in current time. Maybe they've existed historically or even mythically. That's the circle. It could be a circle of puppies. It's like a circle of love, of loving energy. And there you are in the center. They're all offering loving kindness to you, wishing you well, offering this sense of blessing. And here, in a somewhat more heightened way, we can experience what it's like to be the recipient of that quality of attention, of care, as you gently stay in touch and repeat the phrases of loving kindness for yourself, phrases coming from them for you. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Really, many, many emotions may arise. You may feel joyous and grateful. I remember feeling embarrassed, like I just wanted to duck down and have all these beings offer loving kindness to one another, forgetting about me. Whatever emotion it is, you can let it come and let it pass as though it was washing through you. The touchstone is the repetition of the phrases. And here too, whenever you find your attention wandering, it's fine. Realizing that you've been gone, that's the magic moment of the whole meditative process. We practice letting go. We practice being kind to ourselves. We practice beginning again. for all the time we usually spend judging ourselves and putting ourselves down. We're recapturing the energy, the force of love in this universe. Let it fill your body if you can. Let it fill your being. So as you receive this energy coming toward you, be in touch with this truth. It's okay to want to be happy and to be safe. Our wish is that all beings, including ourselves, be happy, be safe. You can let go of the visualization, dissolve the circle. We'll go back to where we began with repeating phrases of loving kindness for ourselves for a few more minutes. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. We can search the entire universe for someone who's more deserving of our love and affection than we are ourselves, and we won't find that person anywhere. We ourselves deserve our own love and affection more than anybody. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze. We'll end the meditation. So thank you.
That was beautiful, Sharon, and I am minded of instructions I have received to protect whatever one has cultivated in practice rather than just suddenly checking your phone for the most recent chats that have come through or turning on the television or something like that. Just stay with it. Allow it to resonate. And as someone who's, as you know, very interested in neurobhavana, the deliberate internalization of wholesome experiences to grow important inner resources like loving kindness generally and loving kindness for oneself in particular. Um, just staying with it, keeping those neurons firing together so they wire these wholesome qualities into our literally our physical bodies, notably our nervous system. It's really a good thing. If I may, as we've said, I have a comment and maybe two questions for you that others might have, and then we can open it up to everybody. And so my first comment was, as I was doing this practice with you, I felt a movement through me of that. It was simply a movement toward safety, toward health, toward happiness, toward ease that felt very beyond me. It was the calling of life altogether. And it reminded me of the ways in which practices like this remind us of what is actually true is that what most living, all sentient beings, what they mostly want is to be safe, healthy, happy, and at ease in their human, monkey, lizard, mouse, goldfish, worm kind of ways. And it's easy to lose sight of that movement toward the good, I'll call it that. And I'm thinking of the sky, which we don't really notice. We notice the clouds in it, and yet the sky is vast. We notice the clouds of conflict and frustration and conflict, but we don't really notice the larger frame that's so natural to us, the movement toward the good and the longing for the good in others as well, which is so important to foreground, which you've done in that practice. So maybe I'll just pause there and wonder if you have a comment or reflection about that.
Well, I mean, we do seem so highly conditioned, don't we? And I would love to ask you about that kind of conditioning and uh, what it's all about. Like people continually ask me why, like why is it so hard or why is it? And I don't. And partly it's the exhortation of some of my teachers. It's like uh, rather than emphasize why, they would always emphasize what, like what's happening, what's my experience of this, how is it changing, and why brings in different systems of thought. So depending on which system you're exploring, there'll be a different explanation. But I am fascinated at the same time, of course, about that kind of conditioning. It doesn't seem like it has to be that we're conditioned so largely toward endless accumulation and uh, kind of harsh self-criticism. And um, I count on you, Rick, to be a lot of my science source. And I remember talking to you years ago about self-compassion and how people were so often equating it with laziness. And you told me that performance studies of many kinds show that like a harsh punitive environment will spike your performance but briefly, and then you'll crash. And if you're interested in something sustained, learning something new or changing a habit or making progress in something, you would do well to cultivate self-compassion as the engine for making that change. And it's so different from what people tend to believe.
That's so true. as you well know, our ancestors, through 600 million years of evolution of the nervous system, developed a so-called negativity bias, which I summarize as having a brain that's like Velcro for bad experiences, but Teflon for good ones. And that bias is really good for survival in an environment in which most animals, including our hunter-gatherer ancestors, lived in a state of healthy equilibrium most of the time, with brief spikes of stress that, as Robert Sapolsky put it, usually ended quickly one way or another, right? And so the natural resting state is equilibrium that's healthy, that's safe, healthy, happy, and living with ease. So that when something bad does happen, it's okay to have that negativity bias. The problem in modern life is we don't live in that home base of a natural, healthy equilibrium. We're continually jostled with information and opportunities and new things to desire, and people manipulating us with fear and greed and busy schedules and pushing, pressing, and all the rest of that. So then the negativity bias really is on steroids. It's on full throttle. And that's why it's so important to listen to people like you, which I do, to come home. You may know the proverb that at bottom all sickness is homesickness, which has a lot of depth to it. And the necessity of coming home to, in this moment, can I feel and may I be safe in this present? May I be healthy enough in the present? May I be connected enough? May I be happy enough? May I be at ease enough in the present? So we can settle in and then train in that, repeatedly marinate in that state of being, so those little neurons are starting to wire together, and you're more and more rested there. You build up that unshakable core over time of resilient well-being, as you know. So I have a question, and then we'll open it up to everybody. I'll keep this question brief. And my question is, how do you understand this paradox that the kinder we are to ourselves, the less we take ourselves personally? What I mean by that is that the kinder we are to ourselves as persons, the more that the pseudo self, the contracted sense of my precious, relaxes over time, right? And when people do these practices that you teach, they don't become arrogant, they don't become conceited, they actually become more mellow, more patient, more spacious, more generous, less likely to take offense, to be indignant, right? They stand up for themselves, but they don't get caught up in themselves.
Well, I think for one thing, you tend to develop a better sense of humor, and so when you said you don't take offense, it's like really like seeing the great relativity of life is interesting, and it's not to say that you want to become passive or complacent at all, which is one of the great misunderstandings. But if I think about the stress dynamic, I really do think of a dynamic. There's the pressure, the incident, the comment we're overhearing, whatever it is, and the resource with which it's met. And to emphasize the resource with which it's met, which may be not feeling so alone, maybe feeling a part of community, it may be inner strengths that we've developed, doesn't mean what people often fear it means, which is that you're never going to do anything about anything. You're just going to be focusing on those things. And it's not true, but we know just from ordinary life, right? Maybe you didn't sleep well at all last night. And then you couldn't get Zoom to work quite properly today. And you flip out, right? Which is different than if you were highly rested and you and a friend were laughing together over your tech problems or whatever it is. We just meet it differently. And that difference actually provides a platform that's a better place from which to try to seek change. And so an important thing to remember, and something I certainly had to remember, was that we're talking, the phrase I used earlier, I'll use again, we're talking about stretching, not being forced or coerced or being violent about things, but realizing I give very little airtime to things I could be grateful for. I spend most of my time about things I could complain about, right? And what would it be like to just give a little airtime to this quite truthful place? Actually, it's not phony. It's quite truthful, and so we're making this experiment
Yeah.
at various times, and it's a different kind of feeling than I'm obliged to, be nice or something like that. It's a very, very different feeling.
Yeah.
And it is fun. Life is more fun when we're not taking everything personally, and when
Right.
we're not. You think about when we're doing some loving kindness for others, and about the amount of time we can spend going over the list of someone's faults and over it and over it and over it and over it. And we don't even find new faults. We're just going over the same list, and it's like that's our day. And you think, why spend the day that way?
Very good. Well, I invite others who are here to put questions in the chat, either visible to everybody, to everyone, or just to me. I'll kind of field them for Sharon, and maybe to kind of get the ball rolling. I've often kind of thought to myself and laughed that some of the better interviewers ought to be psychotherapists, and I suspect there's some of you in the group, coaches, therapists, and so forth, because we tend to ask people questions for a living. So, okay, so Sharon, you're kind of an avatar of self-compassion, loving kindness, including to yourself. You referred to something that struck me when you talked about when you started doing that practice where the circle of puppies and teachers mingling together were sending you, loving kindness and support, et cetera, that you felt embarrassed, you wanted to hunker down initially. What is a key thing, maybe rooted in your own childhood, that you've had to kind of overcome to be able to, that other people might share, me included, that you've had to practice with and that you've had to overcome in order to receive the blessings of this practice
Yeah,
into
yeah,
yourself?
yeah. There's so much. It's hard to
One
narrow
big
that
thing.
down. Yeah.
Go for it.
Well, I mean, a lot of my childhood was sort of absent. Like I didn't have real parents, mostly. Certainly after a while, and so I would say that what came in within me as a kind of parental voice of guidance was really intense self-criticism. And not because I was receiving particularly that from others, but because I wasn't receiving much of anything from others. And for whatever reason, the construction of that became very strong. So, for example, I went to India when I was 18. That's when I learned how to meditate. My first teacher was S.N. Goenka, and I'm somewhat famous for having marched up to him and at one point and saying, I never used to be an angry person before I started meditating, thereby laying blame exactly where I felt it belonged. And clearly it was all his fault. I was experiencing all this anger, and needless to say, I'd been hugely angry, but I hadn't seen it. I mean, I'd never been in therapy. I'd never really looked within. I was 18, and and so in the beginning, the kind of unraveling of kind of my emotional landscape was accompanied by tremendous judgment, and it was really important for me to actually believe what I was hearing, and what was being mirrored toward me from those very wonderful teachers, all of them, which was a kind of loving presence that could be aware, really, and in touch with anything. And so that took a while to really understand, which is why the irony for me in teaching loving kindness so much is that the underlying principle of the practice is said to do it in the easiest way possible. That's why they start with themselves. So, it doesn't really work for a lot of people.
Right.
That's the easiest of all. And so that principle was emphasized to me over and over again. And so I just go with the principle when I'm teaching. Like if somebody's really struggling with loving kindness for themselves, I wouldn't start where we started, which is you yourself offering it to
Yeah.
yourself. Maybe I would start with someone else offering it to you, and accept there are going to be lots of feelings that don't feel like you deserve it. That's okay. That's what's coming up. That's what you're letting wash through,
And you
and
keep
you
doing
just
it.
keep doing it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm looking at the faces of people here, and it's okay if you don't have your camera on. No worries at all. And I'm struck by the kindness, the attentiveness, the givingness in people's faces, and then I began to reflect that maybe that's mirrored in my own. Maybe others can play with that as well, and the ways in which we can learn about ourselves and locate and find a streaming of goodness broadly in ourselves, in part by recognizing the goodness in others. And I'm often struck by how easy it is to recognize someone just walking past you on the street or just down the hall or in your apartment building or office. And you can see, yeah, you're a basically good person. Don't need to be a saint to be a basically good person. And yet there's a profound taboo against recognizing ourselves in that way. Right. And I think as a broad principle, so much of practice is about gradually learning to live in and be lived by what we know to be true, including ultimate oneness with everything, of course. And so we know it, like, oh yeah, logically I'm a basically decent person, but do I feel it? No. And then you try to help yourself gradually live into it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'll just say one more little teeny thing, and I'm seeing questions coming in, which is great, which is just related to what you were saying there, Sharon, about just the power. There you were, this really angry person. I, of course, want to know what Goenka said back to you, but
He just left.
oh, great. That was fine. That was an answer. Anyway, the gradual accumulation of moments of practice. I'm going to think of, Tibetan saying, what? Gradual cultivation, sudden awakening. Gradual cultivation. I remember Suzuki Roshi's line, I'm not sure if there are enlightened beings. I am sure that there are enlightened moments. And the gradual accumulation and the effect of those, like countless drops of rain gradually wearing away the Grand Canyon, right, over time.
Yeah, every moment. One of my favorite images has always been in a homey sort of way. The Buddha saying something like, the mind will get filled with qualities like mindfulness and loving kindness moment by moment, the way a bucket will get filled with water drop by drop. Just
Yes,
one drop and one
that's
drop
right.
and one drop. And I love that image right away because I could just imagine myself standing by that bucket and looking in and thinking, isn't it going to be great when it's all filled and I'm fully enlightened, floating down the streets of New York and not bothering to add the next drop, which is the only thing that matters. And certainly we could stand by the bucket and look in and think, it's
Yeah,
very empty in there. It's kind of bleak. It's
yeah,
never going to get filled. And once again, not bothering to do the one thing that really matters, which is in this moment, can you add a drop?
yeah.
And since I started using the image and teaching, people have come up to me with their own iterations, which are a lot of fun, like standing by your bucket and completely ignoring it to peer over into someone else's bucket, like, how they doing? Or a lot of people say to me, I think my bucket has a leak. And I say, these buckets do not leak. They
Uh,
just don't. It's not in their nature.
yeah.
So it's like right now and right now, and then you lose it completely.
Mm,
Seems inevitable, but when you can start again, it's like right now, right now.
yeah. In some ways, you're speaking to a question comment that came in from Heidi at 46 minutes past the hour. People can see it in the chat, who writes, I have a fear of putting forth energy and agency that might exhaust me. I wonder how I could navigate this inquiry.
Looking at the question, I wonder if it has to do with kind of compassionate action and how often that can, if that's what, Heidi, if that's what you mean about putting forth energy or agency. I think in terms of practice, what we were just talking about is right. It's just one moment at a time, and sometimes viewing problems or challenges that way is very similar. Like I was teaching here once. I'm right next door to the Insight Meditation Society right now, and many years ago, and I was teaching with this colleague, Susan, who had been, she began her own practice here at the Insight Meditation Society, maybe like 20 years earlier than that. And so she was giving the talk that night, and I was just sitting there in the hall. And she said, 20 years ago when I did my first retreat, I was so restless. I had like this overwhelming restlessness. And I went in to see Sharon, who's one of the teachers, was one of the teachers at that retreat. She said, I went in to see Sharon and I said to her, has anyone ever died of restlessness? And she said, so of course I was very interested, like, what did I say 20 years before then? And she said, I went in to see Sharon and I said, has anyone ever died of restlessness? And she said, not from just one moment at a time of it. And I thought that was a really good answer. That was really good. So I always come back to that point myself in my own practice. It's like, okay, in this moment. But if you're talking about compassionate action, kind of in a larger sphere of living a life and interacting with people and how exhausting that is. Yeah, physical energy for the good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then, I think it takes a real, and we all need and deserve a real investigation of what do we mean by compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the traditional teachings, it would be accompanied by this quality of equanimity, which does not mean indifference, but it's balance. And so where does the balance come from? Maybe it's compassion toward ourselves as well as toward others, or maybe it's compassion and wisdom together, that impulse to try to do good, but also an understanding of limits,
Yeah.
which is
I,
wisdom.
yeah. I think building on what you said about there's no being in the universe that is more deserving of love than you are. It's not necessarily that you are more deserving than others, but you're not any less deserving. In that context, thinking about the comment question from Heidi there, that just the really importance of filling ourselves up as well. Starting there, put your own oxygen mask on first. I think about my very first book was about mothers and depleted mothers, just running on empty, understandably, not just mothers. So I think that part's really important, and and life's a marathon, not a sprint. Here's another comment that came in just to me, so I won't use the person's name. Wondering about my body's need to rhythmically bend forward, like saying yes physically in religious traditions. How does that relate to the meditation that we did here of loving kindness, the embodiment of that movement, including toward oneself?
I don't know that a specific movement is tied to a specific feeling, but in general, like there's often an experience in meditation of like shaking or moving or rocking or something like that, which traditionally would be said to come from like all our energy really gathering. It's sometimes translated as intense interest
Mm,
or zeal, like it's just like so much of our energy is coming together that it has physiological consequences. People get goosebumps or they rock, so I would suspect that was what it was. Enjoy it.
mm, yeah. I think about mind and body, and bad news is that issues with the mind can cascade into the body. Body issues can cascade into the mind. Good news, because they're linked, the flows can go the other way. Benefiting the body can support the mind, like sitting in a comfortable posture, having good nutrition, making sure you have appropriate support for serotonin metabolism, one way or another, including making sure you get enough iron to convert tryptophan to serotonin in that metabolic pathway, etc. Flip the other way, right? And I'm just struck by how practices of putting your hands on the heart are so common, or tender on your cheek. You could start there, or after you work with the mind, you might find your body naturally moving into a hug. You know, for me, recognizing myself as a frail, frightened monkey who wants a hug, it's been really good. So I want to build on some of the other things that are coming here, including maybe related to your story with Goenka, bless his memory. Privately to me, someone asked, what meditation practices, such as self-compassion, loving kindness, or others, would you and Sharon recommend for preventatively dissolving seeds of anger? And this is worsened by this person having speaking of the body, a physiological condition, a heart condition that is worsened by stress and anger. So getting angry can actually be life-threatening for that person. Right. So what do you suggest? Key practices for dissolving the seeds of anger?
Um, I think it would be a multi-directional approach, because there's a lot that can be done once the anger's arisen before it escalates.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a key point. It's kind of a key place for mindfulness, because there's the anger itself, which we might experience almost like a storm moving through us.
Mm.
And or we might experience it like we might grab it and take it to heart and build a future. This is all I'll ever feel, or a sense of isolation. I'm the only one, or whatever it is. We like start cluttering the space a lot with a lot of stuff. The word in the Pali language, the language of the original Buddhist text, is papancha. It means proliferation. The story I usually tell about it, I've never found a better story, is I was teaching with my friend Joseph Goldstein once, and he and I were sitting having a cup of tea, and someone came into the kitchen and said to Joseph, I just had this really terrible experience. So Joseph said, well, what happened? And he said, I felt all this tension in my jaw, and I realized what an incredibly uptight person I am, and how I always have been and I always will be. And Joseph said, you mean you felt a lot of tension in your jaw? And he said, yes, I've never been able to get close to people. It's never going to change. And Joseph said, you mean you felt a lot of tension in your jaw? So we do that. We build and build and build and build. So being able to see the anger earlier, feel it in your body, catch that impulse to like build and build and build, will go a long way toward giving us options. Maybe the anger is pointing to some thing you need to turn down or have a better boundary or whatever, but you don't need like all the burning and the constriction at the same time. Or maybe it is more preventing the seeds as much as possible, and it's kind of knowing when you're personally insulted, or when you're most vulnerable, and just taking a few breaths, just like, just going to breathe. I'm going to feel my body. I'm going to try to do something with the energy, so that I'm not just left feeling helpless and like there's nothing for me to say or do. But it's more taking that energy and making it into agency, rather than being compelled, by the burning of the anger. And we can do that. I mean, that's what mindfulness training actually does.
I think about Proverbs, traditional descriptions of anger, with its honeyed tip and poisoned barb. And another related phrase that you'll recognize, Sharon, essentially when we observe our own minds, recognizing three things, and again and again and again, the gratification, the danger, and the escape. Escape in a good sense, the freedom, the release, the moving on, the gratification. And anger, unlike any other so-called negative emotion, the four major ones, as you know, are sort of the anger spectrum, the sadness spectrum, the fear spectrum, and the shame, inadequacy, hurt spectrum. Of those four, people don't like feeling inadequate. They don't like feeling afraid. They don't like feeling sad. But man, does anger feel good, especially that first rush. And it releases dopamine and norepinephrine in your brain, which are essentially reward molecules. And so we have to be really careful about it, at least for myself, and including being careful about in myself, certainly the rewards of righteousness. Oh man, it's so satisfying to write that slammer email in your mind at 3 in the morning. You know that happily you don't actually send when when the sun rises, and so to me that's actually quite helpful to recognize the ways in which the brain chases anger, and that's really important. While also, gosh, there are a lot of reasons why people are pissed off, understandably. And if you belong to a group of people who's had your very legitimate, valid sense of outrage and injustice and being wounded, mistreated, if you've had that discounted, like girls, women, and as a generalization, and others, past and present, it's especially important to not. I think it's especially important to claim the power. Use power, anger. Don't let it use you. Use it to energize yourself, to highlight injustice, to mobilize appropriate action, to help you sort out what you can do while finding a way to be at peace, partly through kindness to yourself with what you can't do anything about. I mean, for me, it's been a real important journey. Yeah. Well, do you have any kind of concluding comments here, Sharon, or blessings for us, or anything?
Oh, many blessings all the time, but
Yeah.
I'm enjoying reading the chat actually, and somebody points out that in my latest book, Real Life, I took a lot about making space for difficult feelings to let them go through, and what was
Yeah.
fun about that was taking from Western psychology, taking from Tibetan teaching, taking from Burmese teaching, and just life itself, and seeing how people kept approaching me as though each was saying something different, and they're all saying exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just different methods or different styles, and basically what they're saying is our awareness, our capacity for compassion is stronger than anything that might be visiting, however intense it might be. And so it's like you said earlier, we don't tend to look at the sky, but we can remind ourselves, and it's like, oh, look at that. Mindfulness can handle this, or compassion has a place here too.
Yeah.
Compassion for myself and so on.
Yeah. When I think about your own work, Sharon, and your writings, they're just so clean and sweet and wise and compelling. And your most recent book is exactly the same. Really important material. Well, I look at this gathering here, right? And in the Compassion Coalition, we're realizing that to make the changes that humanity is calling out for, that life altogether is calling out for, we must come together at larger and larger scales that are big enough to be powerful enough to actually move things and change centuries old, millennia old systems of injustice that drive and create so much unnecessary suffering in the world. We must come together. So we can feel the beginnings of that with the 100 or so people that have participated here, and can feel that we're part of that larger stream. Each of us in our own way drops, right? We're each big drops in the big bucket, the big river. And may it all keep carrying us in a good direction. And I think, Sharon, your work and your most recent book are such a contribution to that. It's like a big splash. There we go. You and your book. Boom, big splash.
Thank you.
How about you take us out, like a minute or two of just closing reflection, Sharon, and then we'll finish in a formal way.
Yeah, I would say let's just sit together quietly for 1 minute. A minute can do a lot.